So this is the, those joining, this is the Affordable Housing Committee meeting of Wednesday, December 13th. We're at 7:06 p.m. We're meeting in the Old Town Hall of, on the second floor conference room, as well as via Zoom. This meeting is being recorded. So with that, we do not have a quorum. We have 3 members present. Herb, Bob, and Steve. We also have in attendance our recording secretary, Gretchen, and Jackie Page from the public, and I think Donna is joining us online. So welcome all. Mr. Fair.
Welcome everyone. We have a couple of items tonight that we'll postpone to see if those show up, and we do in fact have a quorum. And those would include election of officers and also our meeting schedule for next year. I think what we can do is to start with the minutes. We have the minutes.
We can't do the minutes.
Oh, we can't do the minutes either. We can't do the minutes either.
Second month in a row.
Yeah, so we have 3 items we actually will hold. So, but we'll see. We'll move through the rest of the agenda. We've got a lot of important things to talk through. And this is our last meeting of the year. The next item we had on the agenda was the payment and leave status.
This will be a very short report. I checked with planning and zoning. They have not received a draft or any proposed text amendment. You will recall that we met with attorney Ray Rizzio to talk about potential change to regulations to allow for, at the commission's discretion, a payment in lieu only with respect to affordable home ownership units, those for sale. We had actually considered this previously. The committee had proposed some text to the Planning and Zoning Commission. It was withdrawn, but that draft is still out there, and we shared that with the attorney and with planning and zoning, but they have not yet come forward with their own proposal for our review. So, really,
so does that mean the development in Southport is still in pause?
In pause, yeah. So they had secured a variance, but they have not taken the next step to come before the Planning and Zoning Commission for site plan approval. And it would need a text amendment in order, I believe, that was their plan to present a text amendment at the same time. So.
Mark, we have 2 different text amendment drafts, one that we submitted and one that Brazil gave us.
Well, they had shared some of their thoughts. I don't think it's actually a proposal. I think the biggest, I guess, discussion point is the formula. What is the appropriate formula, the equivalent contribution for the housing trust fund in lieu of producing the unit at the time. And the proposal we set forth was obviously
A good one.
A good one, in the sense that it provided an actual dollar amount that we could actually use to produce housing elsewhere. So it was more in line with what it costs to produce the housing here.
So I was wondering if we should send that to like our consultant, whose name escapes me now, who did the affordable housing plan.
Glenn?
Yeah,
Oh, Glenn?
to see, because he must see many of these in his work.
Maybe. I mean, I certainly could have a conversation with them. I think when we did some analysis ourselves, and we looked at what other communities charge, and there's quite a range. Some were absurdly low, and others were more appropriate to market conditions. So I think ours is closer to the other end of the spectrum. So I think more reasonable from my perspective. Developers.
I thought it was a good number because it got close to what it really costs.
Right.
Yeah.
That was the intent. And then to have it adjust over time, so you have a formula so that would adjust with inflation or whatever whatever the standard you're using. But I think they're going to take it under advisement and come back with their own proposal.
What is this, town?
Yes, affordable housing.
Okay. What do you want, salad, chicken?
You're coming through, Donna, so you may
Oh,
want.
sorry.
And who is that?
A member of the public?
Oh, just anybody? We don't know.
I see it's Donna, so.
And we do have Jackie here. I don't know if
Yes,
you
yeah.
mentioned that. So,
I did. Anything else on that?
Well, remind us again, Mark, how was that formula developed? The one that we
Well,
used?
honestly, when we were talking about it the first time, I backed into a number that seemed reasonable in terms of the cost, and then we made the formula from that, and so that would adjust over time. So we originally came up with $1 that we were looking for, and then the formula that created that. But it has, so when I checked it again, it's done what it's supposed to, it adjusted based on.
Pegged it to a fraction more than one of the area median income.
Correct, right.
Yeah, rather than having a construction cost number.
Yeah.
And again, I think that the result was a really good number.
Yeah.
Easy to track as well, so that's good.
Okay, great. Well, then, we'll just continue
keep
this
the
on.
monitoring and check back, and I did see attorney Chris Russo a few weeks back and asked him where he stood on it, and indicated I slammed, but I gotta get this done. I'm getting a lot of pressure to get it done, so, but nothing has changed the last 3 weeks. Guess they're very busy.
Then the affordable housing plan. Review of where we are versus the plan. Our 11 strategies, and if we added a couple to that, one was left over from the prior plan, and another one was basically outreach, communication and outreach. So not that we need to spend much time on this, but this is paved right out of the plan, Mark. Right, what is it? Jackie and. Gotcha, okay. So we've been focusing on. Number one, which is increase the affordability set aside requirements. Number three, supporting the housing authority. Number seven, which has been, we've referred to as middle housing, but it's identify additional ways to allow more types of housing in more areas. And that's actually bigger than middle housing. And that includes things like, parking lot reclamation and the like, and looking at town-owned properties and so forth. Also, number 11, which is guidelines for the Housing Trust Fund. We've been talking about that. And one of the ones we added, which is, I refer to as number 13, which is outreach, communication and outreach, that we put a big emphasis on. One example of that being the ADU seminar, and also the plans to, go to the public, not just with the RTM, but beyond that in 2024 to let everyone know, and to kind of bring the level of awareness and education of the public up. So, we've done a lot of work in these 5 areas, haven't necessarily closed any of them out, but have done a lot. And Mark and I talked earlier in the week. Mark's working on a draft of the report that we would give to the RTM, which covers a lot of these things and goes beyond this, to include, address some things that aren't specifically noted here. And Mark, it might be worthwhile to mention some of those other items that that you had contemplated including in the.
I just did a quick, went back and looked through our minutes and record of our meetings this past year. We made progress in a lot of on multiple fronts. As you said, didn't complete any of the action items identified in the plan, but there were some notable successes along the way. We obviously did break ground on the 244, Greenfield Street, first project with Habitat for Humanity, early this year. And as part of that, along the lines of education and outreach, Bob drafted and created a brochure about the Housing Trust Fund, so that we might be able to solicit donations. And we, at that time, we also were looking at whether or not it would be advantageous for us to establish a 501c3. I think we concluded that we don't necessarily need to do that. Although Steve had done some additional work talking to the IRS about, whether municipalities could do that, in terms of providing tax write-off benefits. We did quite a bit of work looking at, non-conforming lots within the residence B and C zones, and that dovetails nicely with the work that the Planning and Zoning Commission is doing on the POCD and possibly upzoning some areas to allow for more missing middle housing. Bob did a really thoughtful analysis of parking utilization, and at the beginning of the meeting, prior to the meeting starting, I actually mentioned there's an Economic Development Commission member who's really looking at the same thing. And so my promise to him was to connect the two of you, in that maybe it would be advantageous for this body to work with economic development and maybe other groups that might also be interested in making better use of large asphalt parking lots. Whether it's for.
I was thinking also of adding another data point. I think the last data point is for spring of this year, and there's probably been another flyover in October, another satellite. So I think I'm gonna update, add an 11th data point for each, just to see if how the trend is going post-COVID, a few more data. So hopefully, perhaps by the end of the year, I'll have updated that and add that to each of the properties I identified.
So what was the flyover with the satellite?
A couple of times a year, this service that we subscribe to.
The assessors have access to
Google Maps.
aerial photography, and you can do time-lapse analysis of various
See how it
parcels
changes over,
Yeah.
over a 3-4 year period. And so I gave Bob the keys to the kingdom, so he could do an analysis. Shh, don't tell anyone, but.
Does Google Earth allow you to do that?
Yeah.
Daily?
Well,
No,
it's only real time.
the baseline is something like Google Earth, but it's a proprietary software. We buy a subscription to it, and the assessor was kind enough to make it available for my use, and I've shared it with other folks. We did look at inclusionary zoning, specifically what other towns are doing in that area. I think, again, we should feel good about where we are, but I do think there's some low-hanging fruit there. Even if we don't come to any consensus or agreement with regard to increasing the percentage, we could certainly tackle whether or not the threshold should be lowered from 10 to 5 in terms of where it applies. I don't think that's a heavy lift. I think it probably would get a lot of buy-in and support.
Anybody else do 5?
I don't know that they do. We were focused more on the percentage, I think.
Right.
But we could certainly go back for those communities that do have a meaningful inclusionary zoning provision and see where it applies.
I don't recall anybody being that low.
No, I don't either.
On the other hand, my thought is we're not necessarily trying to encourage 5 to 9 unit developments. So 2 to 4 is fine, and then upwards of that, but the 5 to 9, I don't know if we're specifically trying to encourage that. So maybe having it apply there, if you round it up, 10% of 5 unit development is half, so it goes up to 1. So is that big a deal? I don't know.
Well, but then it would be really good to have that in lieu of thing, because somebody with 5 unit development doesn't want to do it, but they might give some money towards housing off-site.
Well, I think when we were looking at it specifically with subdivision regulations, we had gone back in time and looked at over the last 20 years and hadn't seen too many, 10 lot subdivisions. Now we have had, a 9 or 10 lot subdivision, depending on how you look at it. And we've had a number of multifamily developments that have come in at 9 units. And I don't think that's coincidental. So I think the commission is if I'm reading that right, I think they would be open to looking at lowering the threshold. If it discourages somebody from coming forward with a 5-unit, 6-unit development, I don't know if that's such a big deal.
So there's a planning perspective, right? An urban planning perspective, and then there's an economic perspective, and then there's a political perspective. And I think we would want to touch bases with people in each one of those spheres.
Yeah.
Mm.
You know, I guess, well, let me finish a couple of other things that you guys did. You did have a few guest speakers. I think that was successful. I think we'd like to continue that, maybe get some ideas from you as to who else we need to hear from. We had Carolyn Vermont and Kevin Moore from Habitat. We had Aisha Woods from the Fairfield County Center for Housing Opportunities. We did have Emmeline and Jim here for talking about the POCD. So, and we did do the ADU workshop again, which I think was very successful. So all in all, I think it was a pretty good year. We did a survey, which I'm gonna share. I could share the results of that. So I think it was a pretty successful year, even though we didn't quite finish any of the major initiatives. But I do think, you know, looking ahead, you mentioned a few. Certainly we could take a further look at that inclusionary zoning provision, whether it's the threshold or the percentage. The payment in lieu option, I think, is for sale units is something that needs to be queued up and ready to go. The parking, I do think, bears attention. I think, again, Bob did a lot of good work on it, and I think it really does speak for itself. And the other thing that, you know, the commission or staff have been considering is looking at that DRD overlay and making some tweaks to make that more meaningful option. And the corollary to that is we've had some interest from folks looking at non-conforming residence lots and residence B and C zones and saying, you know, would the town entertain you know, a duplex in a non-conforming situation in residence B zone if both units were deed restricted as affordable? And I think, you know, I would say, yeah, I think that would be a good thing. So again, setting some thresholds for that, it's kind of giving relief within the zoning regulations to allow for that. But I think those things are things that we could talk to the commission about, and suggesting that maybe in the first quarter, we might have a joint planning meeting with the Planning and Zoning Commission to broach a few of these things and maybe others, and get their informal feedback before we advance the formal application.
I think it'd be good to do that. And we have done a lot of work in terms of the Zone B, Zone C analysis, especially Zone B. We also looked early part of the year, I guess, at town-owned properties.
Yep.
To see if there are opportunities there. So we've been,
Another focal point of this Economic Development Commission member is looking at a town-owned property, so it's like.
Yeah, but from an open space point of view, or?
I think he's looking at, well, is this the highest and best use for this property? Could we do something better with it? And, you know, there's not, you guys have done analysis before, there's limited opportunities, but there are some.
there are some, and how much of an opportunity depends upon how urgent it is that we.
How aggressive people
Fine.
want to get.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, I think all that is worth mentioning.
I would love to get it on a burner, the form of COVID testing site. You know, just keep that in people's minds. I mean,
That's
that
one.
could be in play.
That's
I mean,
one that the ADC is also focused on.
Yeah.
Maybe a different perspective on it, but again.
There's gotta be a lot of interest from a lot of people in that property.
It's such a central property, and
Yeah.
such sizable, absolutely.
Have we not also inched closer to applying for more than?
Yes, and I think this year we should be looking at probably second quarter, putting together, I'm actually just assembling documents tonight on our application. So it is a work in progress, but I think what we're looking at is 26 Beacon Square, 5545 Park Avenue, and 528 Black Rock Turnpike are all under construction and should, I know that 5545 Park Avenue, I talked, which is the largest of them. I talked to the developer who indicated he thinks that he's gonna be getting a CO in May. That's kind of our timing. I think 26 Beacon Square seems to be also in that first or second quarter of 2024. And Black Rock Turnpike might languish a little bit more.
And then the Ash Creek,
Ash Creek, I would put that like third or fourth quarter of 2024. Based on,
What's the address on, is it Ash Creek or is it?
well, it's not Ash Creek.
You're talking,
That corner,
you're
you did.
talking the 70 units, building number 4 of the Accurate project,
So I don't know if this is the right time, but I'll do it anyway since I've brought it up. This, I did it, I was speaking to Herb and he said, rightly so, that we ought to be able to project moratorium times and be able to explain them to both the selectmen and other folks we deal with. And so I just redid, well, the other thing, or had mentioned, which is correct, that if we get the moratorium, we won't get APDG points in the future during the moratorium, so we have to look at a place. And so this, of course, is the draft, but I had taken and redid your thing, Mark, to look into the future and to see when we would get the moratorium, number one, and how it might change over the next 5 years when we got the moratorium, number two. And a lot of it is, I'm not guessing, but looking, it's looking at the future, it's the one building permits and CVOs would be done. But I do think it's something that we ought to be able to have for ourselves and be able to share with folks. That's, so I
got this in a different format, of course, but thinking along the same lines here.
because we're gonna get the moratorium next year. Pick a date, July or something, and
Well, we apply in May, it takes 6 months really to put it together, I mean, to get it approved.
but is it then approved as of May?
I think it's approved as of the date that the commissioner approves it. Because you have basically, when you put the application, then you have to provide notice to the public, which is kind of a last call for anyone to submit their applications, and that has to go out for a period of
That
time.
sucks.
It does suck, but
Not for the minutes.
it is, it's the process they want for, so. It takes a bit of time, but we're gonna try to make sure everything's ready to go. So when we get that final CO, we just push send.
But we get to say the end date of the collection of points, so that if you submit in May, C of Os that get issued in June or July or August, go towards moratorium number 3.
Correct. And
You
actually, we'll
Put that
probably,
into
right,
number
you
one.
don't usually have, you don't hit the number right on the nose. So you usually have some points that you reserve for the future application. And then anything, entered in deed restricted or constructed after that point, same thing applies to
And-
that.
You do the application, the town does.
I can't find anyone else to do it. So.
And so you have a copy, so a successful application that you can.
I have procured a copy of another community that has done this successfully. Of course, we will be the largest community by far to apply for a
Oh, really?
moratorium. Yes. The other ones are small and it's painfully short. They have 3 projects, they're done. I'm gonna have probably my summary is gonna be 10 pages long in terms of the projects that we have here.
Do you have the Westport application?
I don't have Westport, I have Brookfields. Yeah.
You want it? Can I just
Sure,
try
I
to?
don't mind. The better, I look at, I borrow stuff from there. I'm just following the
Yeah.
playbook that, I mean, it was approved, so I assume it must have all the essential ingredients in there, so I'm just following exactly what they did.
I don't wanna have a situation like we had at, Greenfield Commons, is it? You know, the 202 application that took us,
3 times.
yeah. You know, so the first time is the charm if we can do it.
Well, it probably, if we have questions, I know that Mike Santoro and others up there would be happy to
Mhm.
talk to us, so I'm sure that, you know, if they're run into some things I don't quite understand, want to get their take on it, we'll do that. I may throw in a few projects that are questionable, and it would be good to have the departments,
Yeah, so I was talking to Herb about Mike, and I don't like that he's the only person that gets to stamp it.
well, I guess
Yeah.
technically he reports up.
Yeah, but if you
Defer.
say we should get 40 units and he says, no, it's 28. I don't wanna just.
We have
accept
that
it.
issue with the housing authority,
Yeah.
Pine Tree.
Yeah,
He's not giving us full credit. So I have the lower number in that.
mhm,
Um, and, you know, the moratorium report I've shared with you before is minimum and maximum
Mhm.
points, so
Yeah.
it's really a range.
Mhm.
And some of those I think we can work to fix on our end here, and so I've reached out to the town attorney to do so.
you know, Mark, in the next 5 years, are we gonna lose any points? Any projects gonna drop off?
No.
Mhm.
The bigger, you know, I've had some inquiries, questions on the larger affordable housing inventory, you know, the 10% number, and, you know, that there's some, categories there that are completely outside of our control, that are imputed numbers, the Chaffa backed mortgages and tenant-based rental assistance all comes from the state. And they fluctuate, especially the Chaffa mortgages, and in some communities, that makes up a substantial portion of their affordable housing inventory, as does government assisted housing, which is quite small here, because our housing authority is quite small. I know Carol's trying to change that, but
Yeah, we looked at that with Glenn and when we did the plan.
Right.
And it's really striking, it's really striking to see, you know, there are a number of communities that are exempt, and all of them have, you know, large numbers of the work already done for them.
Yeah.
But,
you know, the issue, you're gonna see, if you looked at a time lapse, you know, over the last 10-15 years, it's the trend line is moving in the right direction, but it's uneven, so it goes up and down each year, and we lose, you know, Chaffa mortgages fluctuate up and down.
They're not deed restricted.
They're not deed restricted, but they count towards the affordable housing inventory.
So we give people down payment assistance.
We do, and that counts into our inventory.
It does,
It does.
even though it's not deed restricted.
It's technically, there's a promissory note, lien associated with it, and they have accepted it. I sent it up to them and they accepted it, but they've accepted that, they've accepted, our rehab loans for single family. Because, you know, honestly, it does provide, affordable housing.
And I think if there's any way that we can legitimately get credit for our effort, we should turn over every rock to see if we can do that.
Just, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't mean a whole lot to go from 2.89% to 2.91%, but makes it, you know, makes us feel better, I suppose, but it's not a meaningful.
Well, the key of the points, right? I mean,
The points are the key.
but we're, you know, we're obviously doing good in the process, and that's what's really important here. I think the idea of doing a meeting, and the earlier the better, with planning and zoning is terrific. I mean, because it would give us a chance to hopefully influence the action that they take. It'd be an opportunity for us to, if I might say, you know, maybe educate them a little bit more about what the realities are associated with affordable housing. And having the kind of dialogue that we want to have, and lay the groundwork for future discussions like that.
it's worked for us in the past with having an informal conversation followed by a formal application, so.
So if Jim could bring that up in their first meeting of the year, that would at least give them time to, you know, get their calendars lined up.
I will follow up with it.
I'm sure they'll get to the public comment stage. I would think they'll get to the public comment stage in the first quarter, although I'm beginning to wonder now. But I think we want to prepare ourselves for, for that stage. So this is a great idea, Mark, Bill, I think, to do that.
Yeah, and I will, a lot of the report, I was going back and looking at it, the report that we usually file, includes numbers from 12/31, the housing trust fund we do year in. I get, and thanks to Steve, some information on the housing market, number of sales, which is a calendar year basis. So I think we'll probably have more, I'll provide a draft for review and discussion at our January meeting, and then hopefully we can finalize that so we present in February.
To the
RTM.
to the,
Does that make sense?
yeah, absolutely.
So Steve, if I can ask you again.
Yeah.
Share that.
A couple of other things that Mark had mentioned. We used to meet with some other groups.
Yeah.
Annually, we tried to meet with Operation Hope. Met with zoning. I don't know if it's other groups we ought to try to meet with. We need to think about the part of the market in the outreach. And the report, do we ever distribute that report to like the local paper or to the colleges? Because it'd be nice if we could get an article that brings the Affordable Housing Committee and the trust fund up to the public's attention periodically.
I mean, you could create a press release. You could on 340.
Yep.
Put that.
Or even, yes, article or the other.
Yeah. Exactly.
The Fairfield citizen might need something to fill the pages.
Yeah.
If anyone has any ideas on guest speakers, Carla, the issue with this night is this is their board meeting night. So there's a lot of, for Operation Hope. We've had Carol Martin here before. Certainly there are other housing providers we can hear from, including for-profit housing providers. We can talk to them. It's always an interesting perspective. I've gotten to know Andy and Tom Montelli and Old Road Residential guys pretty well, and they have they're not altruistic, they're in for-profit, but they have a good feel for the current market conditions and have a good perspective on things. But if anyone has any other suggestions or thoughts, I know we will reach out to the first selectman to join us at some point to say a few words, and maybe we want to have with the start of the legislative session, maybe we want to extend an open invitation to our legislative delegation to join us too.
We had them come one
Yeah,
time.
we've had them come. So, there's a lot of folks that we could hear from, which I think is helpful.
Yeah, Yvonne Klein's a good person.
Yvonne Klein from Fairfield Fairfield County Talks Housing. She's willing to come, I'm sure.
Darian's done well in terms of getting it in.
And Mark, there's a community or two that's about our size, right, in the state. West Hartford.
West Hartford, yeah.
Maybe another one or two. Would it be helpful to have a dialogue with them? Because they're
Sure.
going through the same stuff, right?
Yeah, I was actually on a panel with the planner from West Hartford. And we exchanged some notes. They've done a couple of, they've used tax abatements to facilitate affordable housing developments, something we're exploring. In their case, it was really to enable the project to go forward. In our case, we're looking at it more to encourage somebody to do more than what we require. It's not because there's a gap so much. But, you know, I think we can learn from what other communities have done, different
It's
approaches.
interesting that they're sort of overshadowed by a larger city, Hartford, and we are too, by Bridgeport.
Sarford's very, in many respects,
Pretty similar,
comparable.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, we can certainly talk to other. And certainly, the folks from the South Central Regional COG owe me more than one favor. David Fink has been, their consultant. I think I've attended, been on numerous panels before that group, thanks to David. And, you know, again, they're not all the same, communities, but they're working as a region to try to address this, and some more diligently than others, but they devote a good portion of their meetings to talking about affordable housing and different approaches.
So in the past year, we've reached out, like on a small group basis, a couple of us to other communities like Stanford and Westport and so forth. And we've got a lot of people that we talked about, you know, Yvonne Klein and West Hartford and the developers and the COG and so forth. So would it make sense to maybe have a couple of us reach out to some of these?
I think
Some time, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think we should probably, maybe want to go through that list and develop like a schedule and then see how we put that in.
I mean, they'd all be great speakers at the entirety, but because we've got so many on the list, you know, and we can't realistically handle more than one.
It's really,
At a time.
I think it's just, you know, maybe a 15-minute presentation and time for questions, and then we can go to a regular business meeting. So I think that works.
And
really
it
well.
could be by Zoom.
By Zoom,
Yeah.
clearly. I think it'll be a lot easier for folks in other parts of the state to participate if we're doing it virtually, so.
We can start thinking about, you know, what we think our priorities should be and the timetable we put together. Great. Anything else as far as the 2022 plan and working the plan that we wanted to talk about now?
You want me to go through the results of the survey?
Let's do that. Yeah, let's get this survey results.
So, we did do a survey, leading into our workshop. Hopefully I can, we had 79 people respond to the survey, most of whom obviously live in town. Most of whom own their own home. Yeah, I don't know why this doesn't show up. There, now it does. So we asked the question, how much do they know? And, you know, I think this speaks to the idea that education outreach is an important component here. A good percentage, either you find very little or nothing at all, so.
And Mark, this was not sent to anybody. They had to log on.
They had to log on.
Yeah.
So it just resided on our website. We did push it out to a couple of different channels. I mean, we could have been, if we had more time, and we should have probably been even more aggressive in terms of getting people to respond. Good percentage indicated that they were actually interested in creating an accessory dwelling unit.
So do we know who they are?
We can probably track
You didn't
IP addresses,
IP.
but you know, I didn't ask names.
Right.
We asked why, what's the primary reason, and most of whom were looking to provide housing for a family member, which is pretty straightforward,
Or agent in place,
or aging in place. That's
which
the
is
second.
similar.
Maybe the top here, but, you know, what are the barriers, I guess, is the question we posed, and, you know, a lot of people did continue to cite regulatory barriers, 7%. This is where I wish I had a follow-on question to drill down, because we didn't know exactly what. Because- And that could be a reflection of a lot of people not knowing much.
Right.
Because I think we've changed our regulations quite a bit to make it easier for people.
They may be thinking they need a public hearing.
Right.
Perhaps.
I'm surprised that cost wasn't higher than that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think because of the population that responded to the survey, I'm not sure that that is a significant barrier, yeah. But some people, second highest was, you know, just the actual physical location, the site itself, whether they had some concerns about whether it would support that. We asked the question if, you're interested, how likely would you be doing this in the next 5 years? There's a good percentage of people that said very likely or likely.
Yeah.
So that's our audience. And then we asked the final question, what's the age? And not surprisingly, a lot of people who responded to this were 55 or 65 years, 55 or older.
Yeah.
No one in the, you know, we didn't get any responses in the, between 18 and 34. Yeah. So they're not thinking about it, for sure.
It really was a lot of genuine interest, I thought, at the
No.
at the session. And a lot of people that, you know, we hadn't seen before, but the speakers that really did an excellent job.
They came away with a lot of information.
They did an excellent job, and all three of them, Bob had recruited Phyllis.
I recruited Jim, but we probably got the better end of that.
She was great.
She did a wonderful job.
Our builder got sick, so he wasn't able to show, but Emline covered that.
Yeah.
The other people were quite good, I thought. The other
Yeah.
ones.
And I think there was enough variation from year one to year two, there was a little different perspective.
Yeah.
I do think that, you know, having it in November around election day and all the other stuff that's gone did probably hurt us a little bit in terms of people's attention but we had a pretty good turnout, I thought.
Yeah, it was good. It wasn't.
October.
Maybe October, you know, even think, you know, maybe switch it up and do something in the spring a
Maybe
little,
that's right,
yeah. But, you know, I did get an invite, to come down to the Bigelow Center and talk a little bit more about ADUs. So, you know, so there's other avenues for us to spread the gospel, so to speak.
There was a woman you introduced me to, Brenda Jams, at the groundbreaking for Habitat. Doesn't she work at the senior center, or is she with the senior group that you work with?
There's quite a few people at that groundbreaking.
Yeah.
I'm not battling here, but you and her are good friends, and she and Jan were, I guess, were good friends.
Not Mary Hogue.
Oh, Mary Helen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Mary Helen, Fairplay.
Yeah, okay.
And we talked about, in
Right.
terms of another group that could support the parking reclamation. Mary Hogue is really, I guess Mary Hogue and Alexis Harrison are sort of the two prominent names that we see all the time as far as sustainability is concerned, but I think Mary would jump on the opportunity to participate in that, but it was probably Mary, because I remember her being there.
So does she work at the senior center, or is she involved there?
No, she's a volunteer, and she's very, very active in a number of areas, but sustainability is probably as important an issue for her, and she was really very instrumental in terms of Fairfield getting the status, recognition, progress in terms of sustainability. Yeah.
We don't talk about that much anymore. Affordable housing, you know, we had talked about it a bit 10 years ago, but you know, we don't talk about it much.
We find other things to talk about, I guess.
It's very, very, very important.
The only, The only thing I will say with regard to the ADUs is that maybe there's an opportunity for us to do, because people did cite regulatory barriers. And I know, there's a record obviously of folks that have had to file for a variance
Right.
application with ZBA. Maybe there's a task for us to look at that and see if there's any themes that emerge in terms of the types of variants that people were asking for and whether that, speaks to some other issue that we need to tackle from a regular.
You had looked at,
Yeah, and I looked again, yesterday. and
I don't know if there is a theme. There may
Well,
not be.
setbacks.
Certainly setbacks is
Setbacks
one.
seem to come up quite.
It's certainly one, but I can go back and look. There was, appear to be 7 that were approved, went through and they were all approved in 2023 through zoning board of appeals.
Yeah.
And of course, the question is, how many others did planning see beyond those 7 that went through zoning board of appeals? I assume a number of others. If we saw 7 others, that would be
Yeah.
quite a good, year's worth of contribution to the ADU stockpile.
Mhm.
But it'd be easy to go back. I noted the addresses, it'd be easy to go back and find out what the common
Yeah.
themes were.
And Urban, might be good to know how long it takes from start to finish. Like with a development, we know it's 3 years or more. With an ADU, is it 2 years? Is it 3 years? Or can they get approval and build within a year?
It's within a year. Phyllis is like 6 months, like they're gonna move in January.
Yeah, I don't think the process is very fast from a town standpoint. I think it's more, unless they need a variance, and even the variance is not a
Right.
lengthy process. You get a decision that day, as part of the meeting.
But it's an over-the-counter approval?
Yeah, so it's almost, they would be driving the process. Could be more of an issue in terms of how long does it take to get an architect to
Sure.
design
Yeah,
something.
plans.
And actually get a builder to give you quotes and really build it. I think that's probably what's driving the length of time, but it would be good to know that. If only to help inform people what they can expect. If there is a common theme.
So we could look into capturing that information. Not necessarily our first priority, but something we could certainly look into and we know the addresses that have been approved, for instance, through ZBA, and we can track and see when they
The
got.
woman who was at on the panel this time. She might be a good person to talk to since she went through it.
Yeah.
And it's done, isn't it? I think.
Well, as Bob said, I think I think June was when they were approved.
Yeah.
And Bob
That'd
said
be good.
during the January.
Yeah,
So they're constructive.
Yeah.
Would we have an interest in looking at seeing how we could expand further?
Well, I think if we're gonna have that planning meeting with planning and zoning, that's an opportunity to add that to the agenda and see if there is an appetite. The bigger issue was where to draw the line with detached units.
Right.
And there was some conversation even when you're approving it, well, maybe we should be more aggressive. Maybe we should allow detached units in more zoning districts, and they ultimately took a more incremental approach, but maybe it's time to. I think part of the concern was, oh my God, there's gonna be all these applications, and we really haven't seen that.
Yeah.
It applies to a narrow niche,
Yeah.
subset that is looking to provide housing for a family member.
Yeah, exactly.
Have we talked more about incentives for the ADUs, like giving money to help them build or give them tax breaks? If they're gonna be
So-
restricted.
I mean, I look at that and I would say we don't necessarily need to. I mean, what's the public benefit? So the offset here would be if somehow these units counted towards our affordable housing inventory, that would be the benefit from my perspective. And even better would be if they counted towards moratorium points.
Mhm.
But, again, the question is, does it have to be restricted for 10 years or 40 years? And I think we know the answer to that question from the Department of Housing standpoint, and I don't think a 40-year deed restriction is workable.
Well, this isn't strictly speaking affordable housing math, but expected cost of losing a senior household.
Well, that would be another way to
We
look
have
at it, too.
calculated at senior advocates, and we believe it's approaching a five-figure number annually. Now, that's the expected cost. It could be
Is that a gross
nothing.
or a net number?
It's a net number. It's a net number when you factor out other
So
quantifiable.
a senior leaves and somebody else comes in, they've got kids in the school system, what's the cost?
It could be enormous,
Yeah.
and it could be nothing if another senior came in and replaced them. But looking at the universe, our estimate is that the expected cost, considering the overall population and its profile is, and this, we haven't updated it for probably 2 years now, was, approaching $10,000 a year then, as a form of annuity. And I cite that number whenever I have an opportunity. And Bill Gerber's heard it, and he actually wrote back and asked me one time several years ago what the assumptions were and whatnot. I told him.
I'm not saying cost isn't a factor for some folks, clearly is, there's a bunch of people who said it was. And you could, and we do have mechanisms right now, whereby we could assist somebody doing an ADU. We have a rehab program if people are income eligible. So that would apply to people at the lower end of the income spectrum, potentially, asset rich but cash poor seniors, might qualify income wise. And then we could provide, it's a loan. There's no interest loan that's repaid when the owner sells the property. So that is a tool right now. We've never done an ADU, but there's no reason we couldn't do it.
And there's a lot of education that comes in here too.
Yeah.
There are parts of the senior disabled tax program, like the deferral element of that's not used at all, in part because people want to pass this asset on to their children. In fact, they could pass on 90% of the asset and have a place to live for 10 years if they would participate in a program like this. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of education opportunity out
We
there.
do have, it's oftentimes hard for people who have paid off their mortgage to then put another lien on their property with a promissory note to repay that. Even though it's a 0% loan, where do you get money for no interest? That's a pretty good deal. With an indefinite term, so it could sit there for 20, 30 years. You just have to pay back the principal at some point, but it's a sticking point for a number of people.
So Herb, what's the $10,000? I'm sorry, who is the $10,000 going to?
The net loss to the town.
To the town government or?
The
to
town coffers,
economy?
the town coffers, yes, to the coffers, yes, to the town treasury.
Okay, all right. So that's a significant number.
The key issue is the education cost. It costs probably easily upwards now $20,000 a year all in to educate a child in the school system. So.
But did you also look at what seniors spend or don't spend in the local economy?
Well, again, people that are coming in would also spend money in the local economy too, so you have to make.
I actually spent
So-
more when I had my kids than I'm spending now. I know that,
Yeah.
There's a series of assumptions I would think that would have to factor into, I think, the biggest issue, and you don't know that if you have a senior household leave, whether that's gonna be replaced by people with school age children that are gonna add to that cost, and that's a tough one too, because you need to provide housing for people with kids in this, our enrollment is actually declining.
Yeah, the issue is not to reduce our school age population by 2,000 kids. The issue is to keep
Seniors.
some
housing.
modicum of seniors here, exactly. All right, so it's now at some point, we'll share that information and just walk through it with everybody. Yeah. But you bring up the issue of tax and financing incentives that obviously pertain potentially to a lot more than ADUs. We talked about it in terms of,
Yeah, I think-
building affordable units and.
Our issue is really, again, we have a pot of money. And we've deployed it, for the most part with projects where the town has been directly involved in some form or another, mostly for land acquisition. either working as usually in partnership with another nonprofit. But, you know, we can assist other projects as well. And I think it just comes down to you have a limited finite resources and where do you want to put the priority? You can't do everything. And I do think there's some justification in prioritizing projects either with nonprofits or with the town where you have a greater percentage of the units being affordable and being affordable for, in essence, perpetuity as compared to a finite term. And those tend to be more deeply targeted to lower income thresholds, populations than what a private developer would do. But you can certainly create programs around assisting private developers too. And our office has used community development block grant funds to assist landlords and others interested in creating housing. But it's a limited term. And so you just have to decide, you know, is it ADUs you want to prioritize? You want to prioritize, you know, things like what we're doing with Habitat or, you know, other projects that we might have down the road.
This is a non sequitur, but for some reason, when you were talking, I was thinking, you and I had looked at an old factory that I think
We
was
did,
on the Wooster
Wiretex.
River or something.
Yep.
Is that still floating around?
No, been repurposed for actually light industrial type use,
okay.
so. It was problematic from multiple levels.
Yeah.
In terms of
The
doing housing
floodplain
there,
and stuff.
yeah. But there are other, I think Bob's surfacing some opportunities. I do think it's probably easier for us to, at some point, maybe work with whether it's the housing authority or Habitat or mutual housing or some other nonprofit to do the heavy lifting, and we can just help them with help them with acquisition costs. But, you know, those are the things that we'd have to talk about, how to deploy those dollars. Get the most bang for the buck.
Well, good.
You're gonna do updates, cause you were at the, I heard you were in attendance virtually for the 110 Woodrow Avenue.
Oh. Yeah, I was, so this came before. This came before the Planning and Zoning Committee last night. It's a 23 unit development at 110 Woodrow, which is very close to the Post Road and
The exit 19.
Exit 19. It's exit 19. Donuts on one side and the Shell station on the other side of the street, the bank, M&T Bank. So it's 23 units. 7 of those would be affordable. It's 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom units, primarily 1 bedroom units. The 1 bedrooms go from 750 to 850 square feet, and the 2 bedrooms go from, let's say, 1150 to 1450 square feet. It's actually a fairly attractive looking photo that they had presented of the structure. It's 3 stories above ground and the parking or most of the parking would be below ground. And it's kind of a wedge shaped lot.
Yeah.
And
Site was approved previously for a similar sized office building.
medical office building, I think. So they aren't finished. They didn't get through it all, and they'll pick it up in January, and then there'll be public comment. There weren't a huge number of people that had signed in to watch, but
I always watch the tape. It's tough to watch live.
no, it is. And
Although Meg is no longer on, so I'll.
Can hear. it was impossible to hear
takes our
Meg
place.
Francis, it was just impossible. Not blaming Meg, it just was
no,
impossible to hear.
It wasn't mic'd.
But, so, yeah, I just thought if people thought they had, locals that maybe were really upset about it, there would have been more people than were, but we'll have to see what plays out, but it looks like it's,
Vacant land now, right? It's vacant land.
It is,
Yeah.
there's nothing on it, right?
it's adjacent to like Coromandel, the
Yeah,
Coromandel.
it used to be
property.
Coromandel, the restaurant was there.
There's a
Dog
dog
grooming
room, repair the
facility.
dog.
Not a big, not a big space.
It's not a big
It's a
space.
very small lot.
It's about an acre, I think.
It's about an acre, a little less, I think.
So,
Three, I think.
Exactly.
it's actually a pretty good spot I mean, there are probably a limited number of people that would be upset. I mean, a lot of the people that potentially are upset are going to complain about traffic. They did have the traffic presentation. They claimed that it'll produce no more than a 1 or 2% increase in traffic.
Oh, I mean, it's 23 units, so well, it's like 23 cars.
Yeah.
Like it's zone
Spread out
commercial
over a
now?
period of time.
Yeah.
It's zone commercial,
But there are thousands that go through that.
right?
Yeah.
So it's not gonna really.
Yeah. So,
But, you know,
so it would be 7 additional affordable units if it's approved.
So right across the street, there's a little office building
mhm.
that looks more like a large home.
It was actually, it's a vet just bought
Oh,
the
yeah?
office building, yeah.
Cause it looks to me like that would be not a bad spot for more residential.
Office buildings. But it's, it's, as Bob said, you have a view as a turnpike. It's bordered by either that and Post Road, so. It's not much.
Picture.
And I guess they had an executive session on Berkeley as well.
I wasn't sure what that was when I came on a little bit late, so it was on Berkeley Road.
Yes. So on appeal. And so. we'll see how far they can push it, I guess. No change other than those two projects in the moratorium, the housing trust fund, very modest change, month over month. For November, we have a balance of $926,795. We had reserved $319,000 for Parkview Commons. It'll come in substantially under that. So we have an adjusted balance of 607,795. Parkview Commons, the bid that was accepted and has been recommended by the committee to the court for approval is 273, of which we've deposited 31,000 as our deposit. So it came in substantially under what the appraised value and also what we paid for other units there, which is appropriate because we didn't get inside, but I know the outside is not much to look at. It doesn't really bother me, the conditions, because we're planning to knock it down anyway, so. We do have an occupant there, so I'd have talked to him before. And, he's looking, but he'd asked if we can help him find another place to. So,
Your contract, are they obligated to deliver it vacant?
well, we're negotiating our development agreement, but in the draft that I've sent to them, it would be our obligation to provide the
It
units.
would be our obligation, but does the bank have to give it to you vacant?
That I don't know. That is actually on my list of questions for the town attorney, along with a few others.
It could be sticky, it could take us a long time to
It
get
can.
possession.
They can't.
But you want to do the right thing because obviously the person's in bad straits.
So I think, part of my thinking and that the 273, that's what gets distributed to all the creditors, et cetera. Whatever's left over, I guess, goes back to the homeowner. But, you know, we'll do what we can to help him find another place, so. I feel better that we have a little bit of a cushion over what we originally thought for that. So in case that comes into play to help move people along. And the other thing, I think the thing that he asked me specifically was, what's the timing? And I said, well, you know, by the time we go through our approval process and get into design and, you know, I don't think we're doing this next month. So you have a little bit of time to get your affairs in order and find another place. We do have another tenant in one of the other buildings and she has kids. So, you know, I've been telling her like, plan on like the end of the school term, you know, thinking about over the summer type thing. She's on a month-to-month. But again, yeah, it's hard to find 3-bedroom houses for what we were charging $1,500 a month rent, you know, it's a bargain in Fairfield, so. But we're gonna have to find it. We can't build it with people in the buildings. Do something. So that's the Housing Trust Fund. Parkview Commons, presented to the RTM committee this past Monday. And, sounded good. You can hear the committee votes, so hopefully I don't have to do too much on Monday. For final approval. 376 Quincy to accept the property, the part of the property. And, Greenfield Street, I did get a revised schedule. It took them a little longer for the site work and pulling the foundation. So they were working on the foundation for the first one we installed in November. Working on the other now. We'll be starting to frame up through December through February. They do some of the work at their warehouse facility. They bring it on site somewhat. So they have here tentative completion date of end of next year. December.
It's longer than I would have expected.
No. They, you know, it's, I guess, a 12-month building.
They're building across the street from me. I'm thinking they'll be done in 6 months.
You know, that part of it is, you know, they might be able to push it a little bit, but that includes the sale. So.
Yeah.
Maybe people come in before Christmas, I guess.
Are they gonna have solar on the roof?
They are looking at that.
Mhm.
Yeah, Sustainable Fairfield, the committee had reached out to me and Kevin Moore from Habitat was gracious enough to meet with them and entertain their proposals and thoughts and suggestions. And they are looking at the solar, see if they can make it work.
I'm just curious, but in my neighborhood, there's been, over the last 10 years, maybe 20 new homes built, maybe more than that. And none of them have solar on them when they're built.
Right.
And I trying to figure out why that is. Does the builder think it's an impediment to sale? Or is it an asset? Because
I don't know, that'd be a good question posed to builders. They might actually think of it as limiting their.
You have to do it at the time of the build. I mean, you don't own it.
That's right. Typically, it's, you don't own it. Yeah.
So I could see it as an add-on. Yeah, I suppose you could do it as part of the build, but it's not something you don't. Yeah, that's it. Did they get a lot of interest at their information session? You
I
know?
didn't hear, but I assumed that they did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they had two, one in Bridgeport, one here.
Yeah.
At the library, so I'm guessing they probably got a lot of interest on. St. Emery's, there's been a flurry of activity recently.
Yeah.
Trading calls with both the diocese and, talking to Carol Martin about her interest, and there's been other developers that have been kicking the tires on this one. I had a conversation today with one. I, candid with them. I mean, Father Sean wants $2 million for it. And I said, look, and I said that to the church, to the diocese, you're gonna be $2 million. That tells me that you're building a 50, 60 unit, multi-story apartment. And, that's an 830G. And if you wanna go that route, I suppose you can go that route. There are a couple other ones that have sprouted up in that neck of the woods neighborhood or been approved. 83 Castle, 528 Black Rock. They're not the most easiest. If you're looking for a smooth ride, it's gonna be an 830. I don't know of ones that are not contentious. So one guy is talking to me today is gonna be a friendly 830G. Well, what's a friendly 830? You're coming in with a 60 unit development. I strongly believe that good design trumps a lot of things. But most people look at it and say, you're doing a what? You're doing 60 units, 4-story building, 5-story building. I don't think it matters how much lipstick you put on that. It's not gonna, there's gonna be people who are gonna be in opposition to it. Now Carol wants to do something more like Pine Tree, but that in terms of density is like 22, 24 units. And she can't afford $2 million to build 24 units. So it's all, and I explained this to the nice person from the diocese. It's like, I'm sure Carol can give you the money up front because she's willing to do these things without lengthy contingencies. And the other people are gonna wanna make sure they get it approved, and that could take some time.
What's the size? Couple acres?
It's only an acre.
It's only 1 acre. So it's just about that as well.
It's small, so it's gonna be as said, so if you're getting $2 million, you're gonna need, cause people are not paying, on a per unit basis. I want 50, 60 more units on a private development. And that's a different kind of development than what Carol has.
It's empty right now, right?
It's a school,
But it isn't an empty school.
it's empty,
And the
very
nuns,
poor shape,
the nun's house is empty.
correct, but they don't wanna sell the convent with it.
Hmm.
So they wanna keep the convent, they just wanna sell the school, which is a tear down. And they want $2 million for it, which I said is kind of rich.
There's the old saying that you name the price, I could name the terms.
Right.
So if they want 2 million and they want it over 40 years, maybe you could work that out.
Drew, I don't know if we got to that point. I mean, there are different ways to slice this, and I assume that they want cash flow. So you can do a couple different ways to provide cash flow to the church, without actually selling the asset necessarily, or selling it over a period of time, I suppose, how you structure it, so. You think Carol wants to buy the thing, but doesn't want to pay $2 million, no flavor.
Who did you speak with from the diocese? Or
Chief legal advisor, real estate person, yeah. I think so one of the things that I asked Carol, when I talked to her in the interest of trying to work cooperatively with the housing authority to advance their mission, what can we do to help you? And, specifically on this project and the one in Southport. And I said, I assume at some point you're gonna need an appraisal, right? And you're gonna need an appraisal that's done to a certain standard, so it meets the criteria of your funder. Can we help with that? And so I have a proposal. I got a proposal from her appraiser. I told her that that she should definitely go ahead with Pequot Avenue. The other one, Bureau Street, is a little too rich for my blood, but I said maybe we can help contribute towards that. So both of those would, move the ball forward. So I just need to get back to her in terms of what we're willing to contribute towards it. Originally, had some money in the budget that I thought I could cover an appraisal, my appraisals, are less than $1,000. Her appraisals are a little more expensive. Pequot wasn't that much more expensive, so I said, you go with that. And the other one is multitudes more, so. It could be something that we can consider under the housing trust. But, I need to lay some groundwork with Board of Selectmen, make sure that's gonna be well received. And so, I know that a lot of people are trying to meet the new first selectman and take his temperature on a couple of things, and I suggested maybe that might be something we would do as well, because I know he is very interested in housing. And so it'd be good for him to meet Carol and understand what she's all about and what she's trying to do. And so that's another thing we have on our to-do list.
What does Carol have in mind for the Pequot property?
Just basically, I've twisted her arm to buy it, rehab it, maintain it as 4 units of rental housing.
That's fair.
So she's gonna, and that was important to the existing property owner, that they would like to, they don't wanna tear down the building. They would like to keep, have a plan that preserves and it is a legal for family in Southport. Go figure.
On Pequot Avenue?
On Pequot Avenue. So, we're, good news is the homeowner, the owner of the property, is willing to work with us, both in terms of, to some degree, in terms of price as well as timing. And so they don't seem to be in any particular rush, but, would like to move while people are of a mind to do something. So the big issue has been for Carol is providing the financing. She went to DOH to provide the gap financing, and they said it didn't fit within their portfolio. And both of us were somewhat incredulous about, missed opportunity. It will support a certain level of conventional financing, because there will be income, but, not to support, the acquisition costs.
It's in good shape, right?
It's in decent shape. She did have in her budget, capital replacement, some things. I think probably indicated the roof, could probably be replaced within the next few years, so. We have alerted our legislative delegation as to this opportunity, so maybe there'll be some opportunity to find some dollars under the seat cushion somewhere. It's, when you have an opportunity to create, the state talks about creating housing in high opportunity communities. It's just not a heavy lift, really, to preserve an existing 4-family and keep it as restricted affordable rental housing with a good steward like the Housing Authority managing it, so. And that's all my report.
Okay, is there any other old business that anyone has?
Rob stuff.
Yes, so I don't,
Bob stuff.
oh,
Yeah.
so do you want to give us kind of an overview where.
Yeah, we had a good discussion a few weeks ago, the four of us, and as a result of that, I've expanded the inventory that we're starting to keep as we visually go around town and see places that look pretty dilapidated, not well cared for, and you know, getting some basic information about the zone and the appraised value and the lot size and that sort of thing. So we've come up with, I guess, an inventory of about 20 different properties, residential properties, and about half of them appear to be attractive to us as potential areas to keep our eyes on for 2-family or 3-family, depending upon the size. They're all Zone B, a couple of R3s in there, and a couple of them are vacant lots, but the rest have old buildings on them, and a couple of them have the same owner. And I think maybe you've had some conversations with a couple of those owners. So this is really kind of a work in progress, kind of keep our ears to the ground. And as we see, I just went going to the senior center yesterday, or, you know, my old home, I used to live down on Mona Terrace, 196 Mona Terrace, and now that's like a 2-family house. Back in the 60s, it wasn't. It was right behind the dump. And, you know, there's a house for sale, 2 houses in Mona Terrace, and it's definitely a tear down. Denise Walsh has the listing. And they're putting
What was how much was it listed for?
600, I think, 600,000. Unbelievable. I mean, it's just, and what they're building on there. 2, 3, 4,
Why is the problem?
huge. So we'll keep our eyes on these and see where there may be a fit. You spotted Nonapog, and I drive by there all the time, and that's kind of a neat little property. This is a corner property, half acre, a little bit bigger than most of the others on our list, and doesn't appear to be occupied.
I think it's vacant.
Yeah, it looks like it does look like it's vacant. And so, and again, the record indicated no septic, but maybe like the other house just down the road from it on Black Rock, maybe it does, and the town record doesn't reflect that. So I would just ask, you know, those of us on the committee to kind of just keep our ears and our eyes open and see for these kinds of distressed properties in zones that would be amenable to adding, you know, increasing the density of additional housing opportunities, depending upon you know, what we'd like to do. So more to follow, but I did update that and sent that spreadsheet to you guys. So we'll keep at it.
Again, thank you for that, Bob. It was very good initial analysis and discussion that we had. So,
Yeah, they're old property. I mean, there are old, sad, tired properties throughout town, you know, here and there. There's some of them in ray zones. I mean, you know, not just exclusive in the city, but so, you know, in terms of naturally affordable housing, maybe that's not.
Steve, you had asked me when we chatted maybe a week or so ago about whether there was any potential for changes in the deed restriction process. And I guess whether there was any potential for us to get our legislative delegation to work on any kind of activity, I think.
No way.
All that I can recall is, I still have an interest in going beyond the 40 years. And we need a test case to say it has to be an 8-G, and that the town could approve it with a 60-year deed restriction or deed restriction in perpetuity. Because the law says it's got to be at least 40 years.
Well, maybe we should ask one of your planning and zoning commissioners to ask that question on record. Came up coincidentally, so well, other people were thinking about that.
So that's all I can remember from our phone call. Was there something else?
I thought, you know, the issue had to do with shorter versus longer term deed restriction.
You know, there was opting out, like the ADUs. I still think there's a way to wiggle around that 40-year deed restriction, but the owner can opt out. And,
Well, I'm gonna test that.
yeah,
People are, provided some rehab, acquisition and rehab assistance. To create much needed housing for folks with Section 8 housing choice vouchers. The 40-year, 40-year, declining balance loan.
Mhm.
So the term is 40 years, but you can opt out anytime. You just pay back the balance that is due. So let's throw that in the mix, see how they treat it. I'm guessing they're gonna treat it as a, not a 40-year restriction, but
Mhm.
I will test it.
Can you test it before you submit in?
No, I'm gonna put it in the moratorium application.
Yeah.
We'll just have less wiggle, you know,
Yeah.
we're gonna be over.
Mhm.
I'll throw a few of those in there and,
Yeah.
if they buy it, then we got more reserve for the second one, so. If they don't buy it, then we kind of know,
Yeah.
and, you know, we can contest that.
In New York State, they have a thing called an Article 78, where you can bring it and it sort of forces the administrator to do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so if Mike were to say, no, he doesn't agree with you, then if it was in New York, you'd bring an Article 78 and challenge it that way. I don't know what we do in Connecticut.
Well, there is an appeal process, and that was how Trumbull got their first moratorium. That appeal hinged on ADUs.
Yeah.
And, they had a very similar take on it.
Yeah.
And
It's
so
not resolved,
it
right?
was never resolved, so we don't know.
Mm.
The AG's office, they gave them a provisional moratorium,
Mhm.
which then expired before the AG's office ruled.
Yeah.
So we got the benefit of a 3-year moratorium without, you know, ever adjudicating the issue.
Okay.
So affordable housing that existed before 1980 doesn't count in the moratorium, right?
Or 1990,
1998?
1990, July 1, 1990 is the cutoff.
I was gonna say the affordable housing that was created before 1980 would already be past 40 years.
So, you know, I've tried to suggest, I don't really understand why, that is so critical. Why they can't give us credit for housing that was built regardless of when it was built. You only get credit one time anyway, but we've tried that several times through the state legislature, so. Yeah, we've got a couple the owner built housing, for example, Parish Court, a lot of these projects all predate 1990.
So Parish Court just got 5 more HUD units, Section 8 units approved. I guess a place went out of business in Sonia and then they gave some.
Yeah, Parish Court is an interesting case because it only counts, again, we're talking about our affordable housing large inventory, the 10%. We only get credit for 77 out of the 100 units there.
That's what I'm saying, because there's gonna be 82 now. They're gonna have, 77 is.
Honestly, I think all 100 should count.
Yeah,
but-
what's 80%?
What is the rationale?
77 are the 30% and the other 22 are the 80%.
Well, we only get 77 counted on our inventory.
Yeah, that is
I
weird.
think
It's all affordable.
I think it should be 100, yeah.
Why is that, Mark?
I think it's because of the financing mechanism. I think, that's how they track the assisted housing. I mean, again, I don't know if it's worth, spending a lot of time arguing with the state over 77 versus, I just know that to my knowledge, all 100 units are affordable.
Right.
And we only get credit for 77, but it doesn't matter for the housing unit equivalency point, because none of the units count towards a moratorium. It's just a question of whether we have 2.89% or 2.92%. You know, so it's
Nothing from Parish Court with the moratorium.
because it all predates 1990.
Oh, it's all that old, okay,
It was built in 75.
I see.
Sullivan McKinney, Parish Court.
Yeah.
Bishop Curtis.
It all
A lot
predated.
of our assisted housing all predates 1990.
Would it qualify, like if they currently have a 40-year restriction and that 40-year ends and we re-restrict it for another 40
And
years?
that's the newly deed restricted provision, so no,
No?
not per Mike Santor. And I get that,
Mhm.
it's the pine tree thing.
Mhm.
it has to be newly deed restricted or built after 1919. So you can't just re-up the deed restriction.
It'd be an interesting number to present to say, yes, we're because you do that 2.5% or 2 point gets bandied a lot, but if you could say, well, actually, there's 300 more units that we don't get credit for that are actually affordable housing in Fairfield.
Well, that does count towards the 77 versus 100. That counts in the 2.9%.
Oh, it does count.
It
in
does
the-
count. We just don't get the moratorium point. So at one point I did a calculation that if we were to include all those, how many points would we pick up? Now, again, a lot of that is age restricted. So you only get a half point for each unit, a full point, which is something they addressed briefly, but it's like just tilting at windmills because it's the way it is. So we get
And we're
think
so,
about the unfairness of it, but it's
I mean, we're so far away from the 10%.
it's like it's esoteric. to
Yeah,
this
I mean,
conversation.
the key thing really is the moratorium points.
I even stopped it at one point. I was like, why am I going through this and doing the state's work to review this list? Because it changes so little. It doesn't change our, who cares if it's 3% or 2% or 5%? It's doesn't mean anything. But, you know, now everyone's fixated on it. So every year now I dutifully file a report with the State Department of Housing.
Yeah, we just spend so much time as a community condemning A30G and talking about how we need to change it, and it's hopeless, it's silly. Instead of just rolling up our sleeves and doing some basic work to make things happen on the ground, which is what we need to do anyway. You know,
Martin, she could do such a great job in making the changes if we could just make it work.
I still think we need to fight on certain issues, because if you look at Mark's list, he's got 41 developments on there, and 19 of them are 830Gs. And you can look around the entire, you could probably add 10 communities together and they wouldn't have 19 830Gs.
I think we've got a very powerful story to tell. I mean, I mean, this is gonna be interesting to see what kind of play we can get out of this beyond the requirements submitted. I think this is wonderful publicity for what we've done as a town.
Well, the other thing is, you know, we do have a lot of 830G, but you don't find too many 13 unit 830Gs either. So we got a lot of 830G applications that are 13 units, 23 units, 29 units. That's unusual too. You know, a lot of times the 830G applications are 100, 150, 200, you know, they're big. But for a small community, you do one of those projects, you're done. You know, that's what it is. So it's unusual, the number and the size of them. So that's because they can, you know, the housing market is strong, the market rates are hefty.
Any new business for tonight?
No, the other one though, coming into the public hearing, in one Black Rock Turnpike. The Reiner, who was manufacturing brownfield sales, so they're proposing.
When is that?
I'm guessing, I think it's scheduled for public hearing in January sometime. It kind of depends on Woodrow, I suppose. That could push it a little bit. But that's a 245 unit mixed use TOD development over by Metro.
And you said mixed use?
Yes,
Yeah, but it's inclusionary, or,
it's inclusionary.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And the conversation we've had with the development team is, you know, you have to provide 12% affordable at or below 80%. Would you be open to providing either at a lower income threshold, like 60%, or more units, or both? So we've talked to them about increasing the percentage and deeply targeting a significant percentage to this lower income bracket in exchange for a tax abatement of some sort.
So one of the options for them would be to have a deeper subsidy, but for fewer percentage, you know, fewer units. So instead of 12%, it might be 10%.
No, we're gonna ask for
Yeah.
more percentage, yeah. Yeah, we're asking for 15% overall, 12% at 60%, 3% at 8%.
But you're giving them,
And there's a mechanism by which we can offset the increase or lower revenue costs. Revenue.
Mhm.
By providing a tax break of some sort, so. I need to, again, I've reached out to the town attorney to make sure that, you know, I'm reading the statutes
Mhm.
correctly. And, you know, I've also reached out to both through Ross, the tax assessor who's looked at it. He's talked to an appraiser, and we've talked to a consultant to help us evaluate the benefit of tax cut and cost. So make sure that, you know, it does. We're not unduly enriching him along the way, and it does what it says it's supposed to do. So just not take my word for it. Get somebody else to certify. But, you know, that would be a good test case for us to see if, you know, that mechanism would work. So we have a floor, and then you know, we can incent people to go beyond if we cover the offset, the cost differential.
just trying to think of how you adjust it over time. Because day one, he's gonna get less income. And maybe that less income, as it increases, won't increase enough to cover expenses. You know, because if you start with $1,000 rent, you know, it increases $30 a year.
That is the crux of the issue. You gotta do some assumptions in there.
Well, you gotta start the conversation.
Right.
You know, he's gotta come back to you.
So that's the only other new stuff that's out there.
Very good. Anything else? Anybody have?
So when is Jackie getting appointed?
She has to get appointed first.
When
hope
is Jackie
so.
getting appointed?
We hope soon.
I can change my,
I mean, is it,
I believe when I talked to the chief of staff over there, they were amazed at the number of appointments they had to make because all these terms are expiring. So I said, well, just keep in mind, we need some folks on the force.
is Jen still in the loop?
She is.
Yeah, okay.
I talked to her today. Things are cooking, but you know, we gotta make the appointment, so hopefully not too long, then we'd have an actual quorum, right?
Right.
So it'd be good.
Yeah, really.
All right, so I think we are adjourning the meeting at what time are we at? 8:44. Thank you, Donna. Appreciate you hanging in there.
Thank you, everyone here. Happy holidays to everybody.